The desert wind hissed against the steel skin of the Sherman as if nature itself had grown tired of the battle. Sand clung to everything: faces, gun barrels, the cracks in their boots, and in that scorched expanse near Kasserine Pass, the only color left was a kind of dull, uniform beige. War had drained the desert of life and left only noise. The Sherman tank groaned to a stop atop a rocky rise, its engine rattling in protest. Inside the metal box, sweat poured down the back of Corporal Thomas "Tommy" Evans as he peered through his gun sight, jaw clenched. He wasn't thinking about his wife back home in Idaho, or his little girl turning 2 without him. He wasn't even thinking about God anymore. Just 30 yards ahead, directly in the center of his crosshairs, stood death incarnate, a tiger eye. "Jesus," breathed Private Charlie Hewitt, the loader, crammed in beside Tommy. That's a damn tiger." Tommy didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Everyone had heard the stories, how American shells just bounced off that thing like pebbles on a barn door. It was a monster, a fortress with tracks. But orders were orders, and they had to try. "He or AP?" Charlie asked, fumbling at the ammo rack. "AP," Tommy said coldly. "Center mass. Let's hope it blinks." Charlie shoved the 75-milliliter armor-piercing round into the breech. The breech clunked shut. Tommy steadied the sight. His hands were slick with sweat. Firing. The shot rocked the tank. The 75-millimeter shell screamed across the 30-yard gap and slammed against the tiger's frontal armor with a sound like a church bell rung with fury. For a split second there was silence. Hope, maybe. But the tiger didn't burn, didn't flinch. A black smudge marked the impact site, nothing more. "Oh, God," Tommy muttered. "We can't even scratch it." Then came the worst sound a tanker could hear: the low mechanical whir of a turret traverse. The Tiger's 88-millimeter cannon slowly, unhurriedly, turned to face them. "Reverse! Reverse!" Sergeant Blake yelled from the driver's position, panic overtaking command. But it was too late. The Tiger's main gun cracked like thunder. Everything turned white inside the Sherman. A blast wave slammed through them, throwing Tommy back. Then smoke. Screaming. Metal. The shell hadn't even needed to hit dead on. The shock wave alone ripped the Sherman apart. Charlie was screaming, something about his leg. Sergeant Blake was silent. Blood pooled on the floor plates. Tommy felt wet heat on his chest and realized some of it was his own. Outside, the Tiger remained motionless, smoke curling from its muzzle. It hadn't moved an inch. It didn't need to. That day at Kasserine Pass, more than half of the American Shermans deployed were lost. Those who survived learned a cruel truth. Their machines were outmatched. Their guns were inadequate. And their commanders, far behind the lines, were still treating North Africa like a soft opening to the war. There was nothing soft about dying in a metal coffin under the African sun. Back at the field hospital, Tommy stared at the canvas ceiling, one eye swollen shut, a broken rib jutting against the bandages around his side. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The other men knew what he'd seen. What he couldn't stop. "Them tigers," someone whispered across the tent. "They ain't tanks. They're gods of war." Tommy didn't correct them, because in that moment, he believed it. The high command didn't, though. Not yet. They still thought tactics could solve the problem, still believed that flanking was enough, or that luck could substitute for firepower. But out there, on the front line, men were dying to prove them wrong. No strategy, no maneuver, no courage could save you from a weapon you couldn't hurt. Something had to change. Something had to break. And far away, in a cold lab in Ottawa, a Canadian physicist was drawing a tiny dart on a chalkboard, muttering to himself about density, velocity, and shape. The answer wasn't bigger. It was faster, sharper, smarter. But for men like Tommy Evans, that answer hadn't arrived yet. And until it did, every time they saw a tiger on the horizon, They were already dead. Weeks passed. The scars on Tommy's body healed faster than the ones in his mind. He had been pulled from the burning Sherman by a pair of medics just before the fuel ignited. Charlie Hewitt didn't make it. They found him half hanging out of the loader's hatch, eyes wide open, hands still clutching a shell that never got a chance to fire. Sergeant Blake was vaporized. There wasn't even a body to bury, just a name for the chaplain to mutter and a letter to send home. Tommy was sent to a replacement depot in Algiers. There was no ceremony, just a clipboard, a clean uniform, and another tank crew he didn't know. The man in charge now was Captain Reginald Marsh, a British officer with the kind of stiff upper lip that could stop a bullet. He didn't smile, he didn't joke, and he sure as hell didn't ask Tommy how it felt to have his entire crew turned into charcoal. "You're being assigned to Firefly 3-1, Marsh said, not looking up from his notes. "You'll find the 17-pounder has a bit more bite than what you're used to. Learn it, quickly." Dismissed. Tommy's new home was a Sherman Firefly, one of the few modified to carry the oversized British 17-pounder anti-tank gun. The barrel stretched out like a spear that didn't quite fit the tank it was welded to. It looked awkward, even stupid. But when he stood in front of it, Tommy felt something he hadn't in months. Hope? Maybe. His new loader was a Scotsman named Ian MacLeod, who never shut up. The driver was Corporal Finn Vargas, a Mexican-American kid from East L.A., who had already seen more than one turret pop like a can of beans. The commander was Sergeant McMillan, Arthur Mack to his men. Quiet, sharp, eyes like cold steel. He didn't need to shout. One look was enough. "Don't think," Mack told them during the first briefing. "Just shoot! And don't ever assume a tiger can't see you. It always can. We've got one chance, that's all. First shot kills, or we don't go home." But even with the 17-pounder, confidence was thin. The AP rounds it fired were bigger, louder, stronger. But still, rumors circled. Tiger frontal armor could still shrug them off. The word was out. Tigers couldn't be beaten unless you caught them on the side or from behind, which, in a battlefield full of hedgerows, broken towns, and kill zones, was a death sentence. Then came the crate. It arrived in silence. No fanfare, just a flat gray box, unmarked, unloaded at the edge of the depot by a pair of Canadian ordnance officers who looked like they hadn't slept in a week. Inside the crate were rounds, but not like any rounds Tommy had ever seen. They were long, thin, and almost laughably light. The casing was odd, almost toy-like. And the core. Nothing more than a thin dart of tungsten, barely thicker than a pencil. It didn't look like it belonged in a war. "What the hell is this?" MacLeod asked, holding one up like a lab experiment. "New APDS, Armour-Piercing Discarding Sabot," said one of the Canadians. "Just call it the dart. Fires faster, hits harder. Don't screw with it." "It's sensitive? Does it work?" Vargas asked, skeptical. "Ask a tiger." They all laughed, nervously, like men trying to pretend they weren't about to gamble their lives on a piece of science that looked like it came out of a toy store. But Tommy didn't laugh. He couldn't. His memory of that first tiger and Charlie's screams were still stitched into his bones. If this weird, fragile round could make a difference, he'd load it with his teeth if he had to. Training with the APDS was limited. The engineers gave them a single pamphlet and some rough fire tables, but the numbers were strange. Higher velocity meant flatter arcs, but less tolerance for error. The round had to hit precisely, or it would veer off like a bullet skipping off a rock. And worse, the sabot had to peel away cleanly the moment the round exited the barrel. If it didn't, the round would tumble and miss entirely. Still, when the gun fired, really fired, the sound was like nothing they'd heard. Not a boom, not a bang. It was a snap, followed by a metallic hiss as the sabot peeled off in flight. It sounded futuristic, like something that didn't belong in the mud and smoke of a 1940s battlefield. Their first chance to use it came sooner than expected. Late August. Northern France, a small farming village just west of Lisieux. Reports of a tiger column moving through the area came down the wire. Mac's crew was ordered to hold a crossroads while the rest of the unit repositioned. 2 fireflies, 1 ambush. It was madness, but it was also an opportunity. The fields were tight, lined with thick hedgerows and low stone walls. Perfect country for getting close. Perfect place to die if the tigers spotted them first. Tommy sat in the gunner's seat, eyes fixed on the long, narrow road ahead. A single APDS round sat in the breech, loaded and ready. The radio crackled once, then silence. Wind rustled the wheat. Then, like thunder from a distant storm, they heard it. Tracks. Heavy ones. Clanking and grinding, a tiger was coming. Tommy exhaled slowly. Steady! He tightened his grip on the controls. The firefly trembled with tension. And then, through the wheat, that familiar shadow emerged. Wide, armored, arrogant, a tiger. Gee! The moment had come. Target acquired, Tommy whispered. Center mass, said Mac. Send the dart. And Tommy pulled the trigger. The firefly roared, but this wasn't the guttural thunder of a standard round. It was something altogether stranger, sharper, like the crack of lightning across an empty sky. A metallic snap, and then a sound almost too quick to follow. The faint hiss of discarded sabot petals spiraling off into the wind, like a mechanical bloom falling apart mid-flight. The APDS round was gone, slicing through the wheat field at nearly 4,000 feet per second. Tommy couldn't even blink before it hit. There was no explosion, no fiery blast, like in the newsreels, just a high-pitched crack, almost like a whip, as the tungsten dart bit through the tiger's frontal armor. And then, nothing. For a heartbeat, it looked like a miss. The tiger kept rolling, still proud, still impenetrable. Still, then its turret stopped, not turned, not traversed, stopped. A puff of black smoke curled out from the gun mantlet, thin and uncertain. The engine clanked once more, then died. It was like watching a giant forget how to breathe. The crew inside never had a chance. Hit confirmed, Tommy whispered, not believing his own eyes. McLeod let out a wild whoop from the loader's seat. That bloody worked! Don't celebrate yet, Mac snapped, raising his binoculars. Second one coming down the lane. Another tiger. The second tiger had seen the flash. It wasn't slowing down. In fact, it was speeding up. It wasn't the measured, mechanical advance of a tank expecting to dominate the field. It was a charge, a rush. The crew inside had just watched their invincible counterpart get killed by a single shot, and panic was clawing at their training. Next APDS, Tommy shouted. Already in! McLeod jammed the breech shut. Tommy adjusted his aim. The tiger was closing the distance fast, less than 150 yards now. Every foot it moved forward brought its 88mm gun closer to firing range. There was no time to breathe. Wait for the angle, Mac said, voice calm, always calm. Let it close just a bit more. Let that plate tilt. The tiger was angling slightly left, trying to use the hedgerows for partial cover. Tommy adjusted, tracking the motion. The exposed portion of the turret was a narrow target. Now! Fire! The firefly spat again. Another sharp snap. Another hiss of separation. The dart struck dead center on the tiger's turret ring, just above the hull, right where the massive machine's ability to rotate lived and died. It was like watching a boxer take a hit to the neck. The tiger didn't explode, but it stopped. The turret jolted slightly, then locked at a crooked angle. No smoke, no fire, but no movement. Inside, death had already happened. No flames meant the crew never had time to react. The tungsten penetrator had pierced through the ring, into the fighting compartment, and shredded everything inside with molten fragments and overpressure. Tommy sat back, stunned. 2 shots, 2 kills, frontal armor, direct hits. The impossible had just become real. Jesus Christ, Vargas muttered from the driver's seat. Is that thing magic? No, Max said, lowering his binoculars. It's physics. The silence was heavy. For the first time in months, there were no tigers roaring back, no shattering shells coming their way. Just 2 metal giants, still and lifeless in the wheat fields, and a single Sherman Firefly standing defiant. Mac, Tommy said after a moment. They're gonna figure this out, Mac nodded. Yeah, but not today. That night, back at the bivouac, word spread fast. The Firefly crew that killed 2 tigers from the front, with tin darts. Officers came to ask questions. Engineers arrived to inspect the barrels. The Canadians who'd delivered the rounds stood at the edge of the crowd, grinning like men who'd just won a bet they weren't supposed to place. The round, the dart, was no longer a secret. It was a legend in the making, but Tommy couldn't sleep. Victory tasted strange when you remembered what the inside of a Sherman looked like after a tiger hit it. The smell of burning oil, the soft whimpering of dying friends. He stared up at the stars, eyes wide open. He'd killed 2 tanks that day. But he knew this was just the beginning. Because somewhere, across the line, in a German camp lit by firelight and fear, someone was writing a report. Someone was staring at a dead tiger and asking, how? And soon, someone would try to answer. The Germans didn't sleep that night either. In a smoky briefing tent behind the crumbling remains of Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, a group of officers in gray sat hunched over a set of photos. They were grainy, but clear enough. 2 tiger tanks, both destroyed, both with only small surgical holes punched cleanly through their frontal armor. Colonel Reinhardt, a tank commander with deep lines carved into his face from years of victories and the rare loss, looked at the images in disbelief. That's the entry wound? A nervous young lieutenant nodded. Jawohl, Herr Oberst. No sign of shaped charge residue. No he-blast. Just a hole. Impossible! There's nothing in Allied inventory that can penetrate a tiger from the front. Not at range. The lieutenant hesitated. Sir, with respect, we believe it's something new. Reinhardt leaned back in his chair, lighting a cigarette with shaky fingers. For over a year, he had led tiger platoons from the Eastern Front to Normandy, carving through Allied tanks like they were made of paper. His crew had laughed at the British Shermans, mocked the Americans, called them Tommy Cookers, because once they lit up, they didn't stop burning. But this wasn't a joke. This was a message. Someone had just changed the rules. Back on the Allied side, Tommy sat on an overturned crate, cradling a battered tin mug of coffee that tasted like gun oil and dust. Around him, the crew bustled through post-battle routines, cleaning out the Firefly, checking the gun mount, restocking rounds. The crate of APDS was almost empty. They had only been issued 5. They'd used 2. Each one had felt like a gamble, and each one had paid off. Captain Marsh wants a report, Max said, stepping out of a command car. He's asking for specifics on velocity, angle of impact, hit placement, everything. Seems the brass is starting to believe. Believe what? McLeod asked. That we're all bloody wizards now? No, Max said. That we've got a fighting chance. They drafted the report by lantern light. Tommy did most of the writing. He had the best memory for numbers and details. Every detail mattered. Barrel temperature, shot distance, target posture. One wrong note and some idiot in London would dismiss the kill as luck, not science. As he wrote, Tommy remembered something Dr. Finch, the Canadian physicist who visited the depot briefly before the crate was delivered, had said. This isn't a bullet, it's a scalpel, but only in the right hands. Tommy wasn't sure if his hands were right. All he knew was the scalpel worked. A week later, orders came in. Operation Totalize, a massive push south from Caen toward Falaise. The goal was to trap and destroy the retreating German 7th Army. The Allies were throwing everything they had at the German line: infantry, air support, tanks, artillery, and the Fireflies were being placed at the tip of the spear. "They want us to hit the big boys first," Mac said, briefing the crew inside a makeshift dugout. "Our job is to find and destroy any Tigers before they can stall the advance." "They're calling us Tiger Cutters," McLeod laughed. Bloody flattering. Tommy didn't laugh. His eyes were fixed on the map, tracing the main road into the town of Cinto. That's where they were headed, and that's where the Germans would dig in. He could feel it. "They'll know by now," Tommy said. "They'll expect us to have something new." "They don't know what it is yet," Mac said. "That gives us one last edge." But it wouldn't last long. The next morning, the column rolled out. The sun was barely cresting the hills when the first contact was made. The Tiger was waiting, well camouflaged in the ruins of a stone barn, its long barrel tracking slowly across the field. It had spotted a Churchill first, one of the heavy British infantry tanks. The 80E Minis fired. The Churchill exploded. Tommy saw the hatch fly open like a lid popped off a boiling pot. A figure scrambled out, on fire. He fell before he reached the dirt. The Tiger turned again, looking for its next kill. "Eyes on," Tommy muttered. 1 o'clock, partially obscured by rubble. "Range?" Mac asked. 500 yards. "Maybe more." "APDS ready?" Mac asked. McLeod gave a grim nod. "Last one." "Make it count," Mac said. Tommy adjusted the scope. The rubble made it tricky. He needed a clear line. The Tiger's hull was shielded, but its turret, just slightly, was exposed. He took a breath. Everything faded. No sound. No smell. No fear, just steel, crosshairs, and the terrible calm that only came before a kill. He fired. The Firefly cracked like thunder. The round vanished. One blink, and it was gone. Even as the sabot clattered to the ground around the Firefly, 3 spent petals from the dart's cradle spiraling into the dust, Tommy already knew it had hit. Not because of the sound. The APDS didn't scream or thunder when it struck. It whispered. A high-pitched crack. Sharp, abrupt, clean. From 500 yards away, the Tiger shuddered. Then everything exploded inside it. The turret jumped, wrenched slightly upward as if kicked by a giant. A burst of smoke jetted from the seams, followed by a thin, dark tongue of fire curling from the commander's hatch. A second later, the hatch blew open, but no one came out. Tommy didn't celebrate. None of them did. Not this time. They'd seen too many tanks die, heard too many men scream. There was no thrill left in it, just necessity. Grim, calculated necessity. But the radio came alive with shouts. "Tiger down! Firefly 3-1! Repeat, Firefly 3D1 took it out. They hit it head-on. Jesus Christ, they nailed it right through the turret." Within seconds, the advance resumed. Allied tanks surged forward. Infantry followed. The wreck of the Tiger became just another part of the battlefield, a broken monument to what was supposed to be invincible. Tommy slumped back in his seat, chest heaving. "That was our last APDS," he said. "Hell of a final shot," Vargas muttered. "You boys just earned your place in a footnote," McLeod said, loading a standard APC round. "Problem is, we're still in the chapter." Mac leaned into the turret, calm as ever. "Won't be long now. They'll resupply us. They have to." But Tommy wasn't so sure. Because as their column pushed deeper into the Norman countryside, German resistance stiffened. The Tigers didn't vanish. They just got meaner, smarter. They stopped exposing themselves, stopped rolling into the open like kings. Now they hid, dug in deep behind stone walls and hedgerows, waiting for fireflies. waiting for them. Word had clearly spread. The Tiger crews weren't laughing anymore. They were hunting back. A few days later, outside the village of Potigny, Firefly 3-2, another tank from their unit, took a hit to the side from an ambush Tiger. The turret was blown completely off, flung 20 feet away like a toy. They found pieces of the crew in trees. That same night, a German artillery strike landed within 50 meters of their bivouac. Shrapnel tore through the command tent. Captain Marsh lost his arm. The message was clear. The Germans were adapting. Fast, but headquarters was adapting too. An airlift dropped in new crates. 6 of them, each stenciled with the black label. Special ordnance, Sabot rounds, handle with care. They weren't even stored in the main depot. They were kept under guard, issued only with a direct field authorization. Tommy ran his fingers over the side of the crate before they opened it. This wasn't just ammo anymore, it was privilege. Firefly crews now carried both power and expectation. If there was a Tiger on the field, they were the ones expected to kill it. First shot, no excuses, and the German tanks kept coming. Each engagement became a game of nerves. The APDS gave them the tool, but not the guarantee. The dart had to hit right. Angled armor could still deflect it. Sabot separation had to be perfect. And sometimes, it just wasn't. They missed once, outside Troon. The round tumbled, skipped off a sloped plate. The Tiger fired back. They lived, but just barely. The blast cracked their optics. Vargas caught shrapnel in his shoulder. McLeod cried that night when no one could see. They were winning, yes, but it was like winning a knife fight in a burning house. Then came the order they dreaded. Advance into Falaise. A cauldron of fire. A town-turned-fortress. Trapped German forces desperate to break out. Allied troops desperate to stop them. And Tigers. Dozens of them. Old ones. New ones. Even the massive Königstiger, the King Tiger, was reported near the front. Tommy sat inside the Firefly that night, staring at the tungsten dart in his hand. Just the core. Smooth. Cold. Nothing to it. But this little needle had changed everything. He thought of Charlie again. Of that first battle. Of the clang, the scream, the sudden fire. Back then, they couldn't even scratch the monster. Now the monster was scared, and tomorrow they'd meet again. The road into Falaise looked like hell had cracked open and spilled its guts into the French countryside. Smoke curled from craters big enough to swallow a truck. Burned-out tanks lay in the ditches like rusted carcasses. Dead cattle rotted where they'd fallen, bloated and stinking. The air was heavy with the sour tang of cordite, diesel, and death. Firefly 3-1 rolled forward slowly, every man inside tense, silent. They knew this was it. The Germans weren't falling back anymore. They were trapped, the Falaise pocket, where 2 massive Allied forces were about to close the vise and squeeze. And the Germans were throwing every last Tiger, every last shell, and every desperate breath into the breach to escape. Tommy's hands gripped the turret controls like they were part of his body. His fingers were stained black from oil and powder. He hadn't washed in days. He didn't care. He had 3 APDS rounds loaded. That was it. 3. That morning, as the sun broke over the ridgeline, Mac had spoken to them with that same cold certainty he always had. No retreat, no backup, no second chances. We hold the corridor. We kill whatever rolls through it. And now they waited. They were dug in behind a collapsed stone farmhouse near the crossroads east of Saint-Lambert-sur-Dive, with 3 other Fireflies. Infantry was sparse. Most of the units were busy holding the outer ring of the pocket. Air support was limited. Clouds had rolled in. It was tanks versus tanks now. Suddenly, the radio crackled. Enemy armor approaching South Road. Repeat, Tiger unit moving fast. Confirmed visual. King Tiger leading column. Tommy's blood ran cold. The King Tiger. He'd only heard about them in rumor. They were the stuff of nightmares. 70 tons of reinforced steel. Sloped frontal armor thicker than any shell could hope to punch through. The new 80mm, longer, faster, deadlier. Even the 17-pounder, with a regular shell, couldn't crack it from the front. But the APDS? Maybe. If it hit right. If it hit perfectly. Through the binoculars, Tommy spotted them, just over the tree line. First came the Panzereifers, older, battered, hurriedly painted with mud for camouflage. Then came the monster, lumbering, snarling, royal, the King Tiger. It moved like a predator that had never known fear. The sight of it alone felt like being punched in the chest. Tommy felt himself tighten up. No matter how many tigers he'd seen, this one was worse. It wasn't just a tank. It was a last stand made of armor and arrogance. Range? Mac asked. Just over 1,000 yards, Tommy replied, adjusting his optics. Too far for standard AP. Close enough for APDS, barely. Then don't wait, Mac said. Aim lower glacis plate. That's our window. Tommy steadied his breath. The gun was loaded. He lined up the shot. The dart was ready. He fired. Snap, hiss. The shell left the barrel like a scream. Sabot, peeling away in the wind. It struck the King Tiger dead center, right in the lower front plate. The round bit. A flash of sparks. A split second of resistance. And then it was gone, swallowed by steel. For a half second, the King Tiger didn't move. Then, a bloom of fire burst from its belly. The tracks on its right side blew apart as if kicked by God. The turret jerked, spasmed, then went still. Inside the Firefly, no one spoke. They just watched. The King Tiger was dead. One shot, one dart. The impossible had happened again. But there wasn't time to breathe. More tanks followed. A second Tigery, a Panzer IV, an anti-tank half-track. Reload, Mac shouted. Next APDS in, McLeod yelled. Engage the second Tiger. Tommy fired again. The second APDS round took the Tiger whine in the turret ring. The effect was immediate. The tank flinched. A plume of smoke erupted from the hatch. Its gun lowered slowly, then slumped like a dying man. 2 down. The remaining Panzer IVs tried to retreat. They didn't make it. The other Fireflies opened up, their own darts finding flesh. It was a slaughter. The Germans, once kings of the battlefield, were being hunted by Shermans, by them. When the last tank burned, the field fell quiet. The radio buzzed with stunned confirmations. King Tiger destroyed. Confirmed kill by Firefly 3-1. All enemy armor neutralized. The silence inside the Firefly was broken only by the sound of breathing. Tommy leaned back, shaking. His hands trembled. He felt like laughing, or crying, or maybe both. I think we just broke their spine, McLeod whispered. Mac didn't say a word. He just nodded. Because he knew. This wasn't just another battle. This was the turning point. The dart had done what no tank, no tactic, no prayer had been able to do. It had pierced the myth. They stayed in position until nightfall, surrounded by burning metal and the still smoldering corpses of machines once thought invincible. The King Tiger's wreckage drew flies, attention, and eventually a string of curious officers. Staff cars arrived, followed by men in crisp uniforms and wide eyes, engineers, analysts, photographers. They circled the dead beast like archaeologists at a ruin, snapping photos of the small, perfect hole in its frontal armor. One of them climbed onto the turret and stared down into the blackened hatch. He climbed out a moment later, pale as chalk. Inside Firefly 3-1, no one moved. They were exhausted, silent. "I don't want to fire another dart again," McLeod said softly. "You will," Mac replied without turning around. "If we survive this, the next war won't even need tanks. Just darts and silence." Tommy sat in the gunner's seat, staring at nothing. The victory didn't feel like he thought it would. He'd killed 3 tigers now, one of them a king tiger, all with a weapon barely thicker than his finger. It had taken him just over 6 seconds to fire those shots, 6 seconds to erase machines that once ruled the battlefield. But it wasn't the steel that haunted him. It was the quiet, the silence that followed. The enemy didn't scream. They didn't cry. They didn't even fight back. Just one snap, one hole, and then nothing. Like the dart didn't just kill the tank. It erased everything inside. That night, they camped near the river. The stars overhead glittered coldly, uncaring. Tommy couldn't sleep. None of them could. The field they'd fought on earlier that day still smoldered, casting dull orange light into the sky like distant lightning. They could hear it, the hiss of dying engines, the occasional pop of ammunition cooking off. The battlefield wasn't quiet. It just whispered now, and those whispers crawled under your skin. "I dreamed about the tiger," Vargas murmured from his bedroll. "Except it was alive after we hit it. And it was mad. Wouldn't die. Just kept rolling forward with fire pouring out of it." "Sounds about right," McLeod said. "They always came forward, no matter what we threw at them." "Until the dart," Tommy stared into the fire. "They'll come up with something else," he said. "Maybe they already have." "No," Max said flatly. "They won't, not in time. You don't fix a hole like that in a few weeks. Not when you've convinced your crews they're invincible. They built the myth too well. Now they're bleeding because of it." The next morning, a courier brought news. Falaise had fallen. The pocket was closed. Tens of thousands of German troops were captured or killed. What armor remained was wrecked, scattered, or abandoned. Firefly 3-1 was reassigned to reserve for repairs and rest. But they didn't rest. They cleaned the barrel, tuned the optics, adjusted the breech. The dart had become sacred, and so had the hands that fired it. That afternoon, Mac handed Tommy a thin envelope, sealed and stamped personal. It was from British Ordnance HQ. "Gunner CPL Thomas Evans, your confirmed armor engagements with the 17-pounder APDS rounds have been evaluated and officially logged. Your crew's performance in the engagements near Lisieux and Falaise represent the first confirmed front-facing kills of the Tigerford and Königsteiger tanks with APDS ammunition. Your field reports have directly contributed to the recalibration of fire tables, range estimation guides, and battlefield deployment strategies for future APDS units. Effective immediately, Firefly 3-1 is authorized to receive and train additional crews on proper APDS implementation. In war, the tide turns not by muscle, but by minds and hands like yours. Chief Engineer Malcolm Brigham, Royal Ordnance Corps." Tommy folded the letter slowly. The words didn't comfort him. Not yet. Because he could still see the hole in that king tiger's front plate. He could still see the smoke curling out of it, like a dying breath. He could still smell the cordite. And he knew the war wasn't over. Not yet. Not until the last tiger stopped breathing. The rain started 2 days later, just as Firefly 3-1 crossed into Belgium. The roads had turned to mud, the skies a ceiling of gray, and the war, though closer to ending than ever, refused to die quietly. Germany was retreating, yes, but it was retreating like a wounded animal. Desperate, vicious, digging in at every crossroad, and holding every hill like it was Berlin itself. Tommy had stopped counting the towns. They rolled through, each one the same. Shattered stone, burned-out tanks, shattered windows. Civilians who looked at them not with joy, but with hollow, exhausted relief. Liberation had come, yes, but so had 100 fires, 1,000 broken families, and more graves than names to carve into them. And the tigers. They weren't gone, just fewer, rarer, but more dangerous. Now, the remaining German tank commanders knew exactly what the APDS could do. No more overconfidence, no more static deployments. Every tiger left alive was driven by a man who knew what it meant to be hunted, and how to hunt back. The final engagement for Firefly 3-1 came outside Aachen, just a few miles into the German border. The terrain had changed. No longer hedgerows and wheat fields, but ruins and forests, tight quarters, perfect for ambush. Infantry had taken most of the town, but German armor remained in the outskirts, concealed in alleyways and behind collapsed churches. Their orders were simple: clear the road for a supply convoy, and kill anything that moved. It should have been routine. It wasn't. They found the tiger just after dawn, waiting near a train station, buried halfway in rubble, only its turret visible above the wreckage. Its camouflage was perfect. If not for a sliver of light catching the edge of its gun barrel, they would have driven right past it. But Tommy saw it, and the tiger saw them. The same second. "Move!" Mac shouted. "Hard left. Get us behind that rail car." Vargas threw the Firefly into gear, but the tiger fired first. The shell struck the ground just short of them, blasting dirt and steel across the front glasses. The Firefly bucked but kept rolling. A second shot would kill them. Tommy jammed the APDS into the breach. "One left!" He adjusted the sight. The tiger's turret was turning, tracking them. Its massive 80 diameter looked like it filled the whole world. "Faster," Mac barked. "He's got us dialed in." "Give me the shot!" Tommy shouted. "Just 10 more feet." The Firefly slid behind the rusted rail car, and for one breathless second, the tiger lost sight of them. That was all Tommy needed. He swung the turret, peeking between two broken freight cars. Just enough space. Just enough line. The tiger's turret was mid-swing. He fired. The crack of the APDS round sliced through the sound of everything else. The rain, the grinding treads, the engine's growl. It struck the tiger's turret just below the cupola. The dart didn't just enter, it shredded. The top of the turret burst open like a pressure cooker. Fire spewed out. The barrel dipped suddenly, then froze. It was over. Just like that. The last tiger. Gone. There was no cheering. Not this time. They sat in silence for a full minute, the rain pattering against the hull, steam rising off the barrel like breath from some weary beast. McLeod finally broke the silence. "That was our last round," Tommy nodded, eyes still fixed on the smoking wreck. "Good," Mac said quietly. "We won't need another." That afternoon, Command officially designated Firefly 3-1 as the most effective APDS deployment crew in the European theater. They were assigned to training duties shortly after, teaching new gunners how to use the dart, how to aim, how to kill with math and metal instead of fear. Tommy hated it. He wasn't made to teach, but he did it anyway. Because the dart worked, and because someone had to pass it on, he never forgot Charlie. He never forgot Kasserine. And he never forgot the clang of that first shell bouncing uselessly off the tiger's face, because that sound, that moment, was what drove him every time he held that thin little dart in his hand. He never wanted to feel helpless again, and by the end of it, he didn't. The dart, born in Canadian labs, mocked by Allied crews, feared by German tankers, changed the war. It was the scalpel that cut through the heart of steel beasts, It gave the underdogs teeth. It gave the dead a voice, and it gave men, like Tommy Evans, a reason to believe that no wall, no armor, no monster was truly invincible.